All right, let's take a look at the 3.1, 3.3 review for Chapter 3. This will be covering parallel lines, perpendicular lines, skew lines, and the special angle pairs. The first couple questions deal with these two diagrams. We're going to be marking them according to the directions, being sure to include proper notation. For parallel lines, remember that we put on arrows for lines that are parallel, and things that are perpendicular we put in the little box to show that we have 90 degrees. I'm specifically going to be looking at questions 4 through 6 and the pentagon that is to the left here. First, question 4 is going to be making a line that goes through X. So I'm going to put a dot on X here, and it has to be parallel to UV. So that would be a line running in the same direction. And because they're parallel, we're going to mark both of those with an arrow. The next question is going to ask us to make a line through Y. So now I'm going to put a dot on Y, and it's going to be perpendicular to YX. So that means I have to be 90 degrees. So again, I'm going to go straight down, and there's my perpendicular line with the little box to YX. Finally, the last question is going to ask us to make a line that goes through W. So we're going to put a dot on W, and parallel to UY. So here's my UY line right here. And if we're going to go through W, parallel to that, that would be a line that runs in this direction. To make sure that you know that those two lines are parallel, we're going to mark them with arrows. But because we already have single arrows, we're actually going to mark those with double arrows. And then that tells you that those go together. Not only do we have the pink color, but we have the double arrows. The next question that I would like to work through are the ones right below it. Those are questions that deal with parallel, perpendicular, and skew lines. And we're going to be using the box on the right. I want to do, first of all, question number 7. If I look at this, I have WZ, which is this line right here. And I'm comparing it to YS, which is this line. Notice that the first line goes to the left and to the right. The second line goes up and down because they are different directions and in two different planes. Those two lines are skew. The next two lines that we're going to talk about, let's do number 9, would be QT, which is this line, and ZY, which is this line. They both go back and forth, so to speak. They are in the same plane, which is diagonally through the box, and so those two lines are parallel. The next question I want to look at is question number 10. It says name a segment that is perpendicular to ZY. Well, right here is ZY. It has to be perpendicular to that. So when it goes up to ZY, it has to make 90 degrees. I actually have 4 of those, and they would be WZ, XY, right here in the back, and the front, ZR, and in the back, YS. Because those are all segments or lines, we're going to put our line markings above those. Oops. And a line mark above those. And so there are 4 possible segments for that. I'm I'm going to erase what I have on my box so that I can do the next couple questions here. We are going to look at planes here. If we look at question 11, plane WZR, here's W, here's Z, here's R. We're talking about the front of the box, and we're going to put that with plane ZRS, which is the side of the box. Those two would be perpendicular. If I were to look at the next question, if I look at RQT on the bottom and XWZ on the top, those two would be considered parallel. And the last thing that I want to just bring to your attention is, why can planes never be skew? Because they will eventually cross if they're not parallel. They will either be parallel or nothing at all. The next questions I would like to do are on page 2. I want to remind you about choosing your answers. So if we look at question 22, again, we're basing everything really at this 106 mostly. I can look at the X with the 106, and those are corresponding angles. So I know that X is equal to 106. If I look at the Y with the 106, those are a linear pair. And I know that those are always equal to 180. So I would have to do 180 minus 106 and get a grand total of 74 degrees. The next group of problems that I would like to go to would be on the next page, and they would be these questions 33 through 36. Again, we're determining if the lines are parallel. For those lines to be parallel, we have to know something about the angles. In this picture, we're given two angles. They are alternate exterior angles. And I know that alternate exterior angles should be equal to each other, and because they're not, these two lines are not parallel. If I look at question 35 right here, I look at these two angles, and those two angles are consecutive interiors. For these two lines to be parallel, those two angles should add up to 180 degrees. If I add that, 10, borrow, 9 and 1 is 10, plus 8 is 180. They do add to 180 degrees. That means these two lines are parallel. Why? Because consecutive interior angles are supplementary, or you could say add up to 180 degrees. The next question that I want to look at is down a little bit, question 37. I want to remind you that sometimes we have to find angles, find variables. We have to do them in a certain order. I like to look for alternate interior angles because they're always equal to each other. So I always look for z's when I can. In this question, I have a z right here, which means that 13y minus 10 must equal 9x plus 12. But the problem here is we have a y and an x, and that's not going to help us out. So then we go and we look at these two angles, which are consecutive interiors, and those are 180 degrees. So we have 13y minus 10 plus 6y equals 180. If you solve this, add 13 and 6 for 19y minus 10 equals 180. Add 10 to both sides, and I have 190. Divide by 19, and I will have y equals 10. Once I find out that y is equal to 10, I can take that angle, plug it into this y value. I multiply 3 times 10, and I have 130 minus 10 equals 9x plus 12. Finish that up, 120 equals 9x plus 12. Subtract 12 from both sides, and I have 108 equals 9x. Divide by 9s, and I end up with x equals 12. So there are my two answers. It's important to know that sometimes you have to find one value and substitute it back in. Right here, substitute, so that you can find the second value. The last questions that I want to quickly go over are the questions at the top of page 4. I want to look specifically at a couple of these angles. If I'm looking at 5 and 3, if I look at angle 5 right here with angle 3 right here, I notice that it's only dealing with the left side of my picture. I'm going to cover up those two angles. That makes my transversal line A, and my two parallel lines then turn out to be M and N. So we say M is parallel to N because alternate interior angles are equal. If we were to do one more question, we could look at question 44, something that's supplementary. I'm going to look at what angle 3 with angle 12. And again, I'm going to scribble out the part of the picture that doesn't deal with anything. If I look at that, M is my transversal between lines A and B, so we say A is parallel to B because consecutive interior angles equal 180. If you go back to the bottom of the page on this one, remember that it is only setup problems. You don't have to do all of the work. You only need to set up these problems on the bottom of the page. If you have time, you're welcome to do that to solve them, but you do not need to. Again, this is the review for the test. If you have questions, please send your teacher a message on Schoology, or you could talk to them before school. Good luck on the final or on the test, Chapter 3 test, and we'll see you tomorrow.